Hi, and welcome to Nevaeh's Nightmare. I'm so sorry I've been gone for so long. I have been in school, but it is spooky season and it is time for some spooky stories. When we tend to think about possession, we think about someone's body being overtaken by a demonic or evil spirits. Most movies dealing with this subject focus on demons taking over innocent people and sparking a battle between good and evil. What is less discussed is when someone is possessed by the spirit of a deceased human being. These cases are rare, but there is one from the late 19th century that is very well documented, and this is the strange case of Lawrence Venom, who is also known as the Watseka Wonder. Before we get into Lawrence Venom and her possession, we have to talk about another girl named Mary Roth. Mary Roth was born in 1846 in Indiana when she was a child, and she moved to Watseka, Illinois with her family. When she was a small infant, Mary began to have severe seizures that persisted all the way until the end of her life. When she was very young, she began to hear voices that told her to do terrible things that she knew she shouldn't do. And sometimes Mary would come out of her trances and speak in strange voices that claimed to be spirits of the deceased, and she also displayed moments of clairvoyancy. Soon, important people in Watseka became interested in Mary, and they would come to Roth's home to speak to her. Mary would tell them in great detail about places she had never visited, predicted future events, and knew precise details about people she had never met. These transic states and the voices took a toll on Mary and her mental health and began to deteriorate. She became violent to her family and herself and developed a strange obsession with blood, wishing to remove her own blood completely from her body. One day she used a razor on herself and her family found her in a pool of her own blood, barely managing to stay alive. All of this became too much for the Roth family to handle, and Mary was sent to a state insane asylum near Peoria. Poor Mary Roth would die there on July 5, 1865, at the age of 18. Fast forward to July 11, 1877. On that morning, a 13-year-old girl named Lawrence Venom woke up feeling sick, and first her family thought nothing of it. Suddenly, Lawrence collapsed, passing out cold, and fell into a deep catatonic-like state for several hours. When she woke up, she told her parents that she felt fine, but the next day she descended into a trance-like sleep. She began to have visions of the spirits of the dead and even claimed that she was speaking to the spirit of her brother who had died in 1874. Soon, Lawrence's experience began to mirror Mary Roth's, with her claims that the spirits would chase her through the house and that they were even attacking her. She also began to speak in languages that she didn't speak in her trance states. When she would awake, she had no memory of what had happened to her. Word got out about Lawrence, and she became a curiosity in Watseka. Her parents were naturally worried about what was happening to their daughter and brought her to the minister and their doctor for assistance, but they both had no cure available for the girl. Finally, they advised that the best course of action would be to take her to the state mental asylum. At their wits' end, Lawrence's parents were about to commit her when they received a visit from Asa Roth, Mary's father. After Mary had died in 1865, Asa Roth had become a devout and committed spiritualist. Side note, the spiritualist movement was intensely popular in the middle 19th century in America. It started in 1848 when two sisters in upstate New York, the Fox sisters, claimed they were communicating with a spirit that dwelled in their parents' farm home. From these humble beginnings, that movement grew and even got all the way to the White House, with Abraham Lincoln having seances in the Oval Office. But back to Asa Roth. When news got back to him about Lawrence's condition, he could see the similarities with what had affected his daughter, and he resolved that Lawrence would not meet the same fate as Mary. Asa met with the Venoms and convinced them that they should allow one of his fellow spiritualists, Dr. E. Winchester Stevens, to examine Lawrence. Looking for some kind of answer, the Venoms readily agreed to this. Asa brought Dr. Stevens to the Venom's home, and they declared that Lawrence was not insane, but she was in fact a vessel to communicate with the dead or a spirit medium. Dr. Stevens proceeded to hypnotize the young girl, and several spirits began to manifest. One was the spirit of an old woman named Katerina Hogan, but in a few moments later, another spirit replaced her. This spirit claimed to be the young man called William Canning who had committed suicide some time earlier. Laurency spoke in this voice for over an hour, but then she threw her arms up in the air and collapsed on the floor. Asa and Dr. Stevens picked her up off the floor, and Laurency exclaimed that she was in heaven and would allow a gentle spirit to take control over her body. Soon, another spirit manifested through Laurency Venom. This would be none other than Mary Roth herself, and she would stay for 4 months. Laurency, or was it Mary's, trance continued all throughout the evening into the next day. Laurency had no longer recognized the house she had grown up in and also didn't recognize her parents. She insisted she wanted to go home, by which she meant the Roth's house. Asa's wife soon heard about what had happened with Laurency, and her oldest daughter, Minerva, rushed over to the Venom's house. When Laurency saw them walking up to the house, she exclaimed, "Here comes Ma and Nervy." No one would have called Minerva by that nickname since Mary had died. The Venom family were completely confused by what had happened. Their daughter no longer recognized them, and now she was claiming to be a completely different person. Asa Roth suggested the best course of action was to bring Laurency to the Roths' home, as the Roths family was convinced their dead daughter had returned from the afterlife. In early February, that is what happened. As they were riding in the buggy towards the Roths' home, Laurency became agitated as they passed their old house. Asa had explained they no longer lived there and that they were in a new place. To Asa, this was yet another proof that Laurency had been possessed by the spirit of his dead daughter. Laurency would then stay with the Roths for a period of 4 months from early February to May in 1878. In this time, she demonstrated all kinds of knowledge about the family and situations that only Mary could have known. Most of the events that Laurency would talk about took place several years before she was even born. With all this information that Laurency conveyed, the Roth family became even more convinced that Mary had returned. To her real family, Laurency remained cordial and polite, but she had confessed to them that she didn't really know them. The two families remained close, with Laurency going back and forth between the homes. The community of Watseka was torn over what to think about these strange occurrences. There were many townspeople, especially medical doctors, that thought Laurency was being used by Dr. Stephen and Roths to justify their beliefs in spiritualism. They felt Laurency was being coached and hypnotized to say that she was possessed by the spirit of Mary Roth, and nothing supernatural was taking place. They even suggested that Laurency be taken to the insane asylum, but the two families brushed off this criticism and insisted that Mary Roth had returned. When Laurency had gone to live with the Roths, she told Mary's mother that she, Mary, would only stay with them until sometime in May. When that time came in early May, Laurency announced that the time had come for Mary to leave her body. She became very sad and depressed, often weeping uncontrollably about having to leave her real family. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, a battle seemed to rage over who had control of Laurency's body. Sometimes Mary would manifest, and at other times it seemed that Laurency would return. In one instance, she recognized her brother Henry Venom, but then Mary had returned. Laurency returned a couple days later when Lorinda Venom, her mother, came to visit, and 2 days after this, Mary went away completely, and Laurency was herself again. After this, Laurency Venom returned to a normal life. The spirit attacks and trances never returned, and Laurency went on to flourish, get married, and live a long life, passing away sometime in the late 1940s. The two families remained close, and Asa Roth received many letters of support and derision from both supporters and skeptics. The Roths had a lot of problems with their neighbors because of these events, and finally had to leave Watseka. Dr. Stevens went on to a lecture circuit and brought attention to the case, publishing a book in 1886, right before he passed on to the spiritual realm. So, what had happened to Laurency Venom in 1877 to 1878? Was she really possessed by the spirit of Mary Roth, or was there something else going on? The tragedy of Mary Roth's death sent her family grasping for answers, and they landed on spiritualism to help explain it. When Azaroth heard about Lawrence Venom, he saw a similar affliction to what Mary had suffered, and he resolved it wouldn't happen to another child. Using hypnosis, Dr. Stevens induced a trance state that pulled the personality of Mary Roth through. Was there a suggestion that Lawrence should manifest as Mary, and she was fed this information unwittingly by the family? Some skeptics even suggested Lawrence had fallen in love with one of Roth's sons and did this whole thing to be close to him. Were both families somehow duped by an imaginative 13-year-old girl, or was there really something supernatural going on? We may never know some of the answers to these questions, but one thing that we do know is that Lawrence was cured from her affliction by having her experience as living as Mary. She went on to live a happy life, and whether or not this was the cause of supernatural, we can be thankful that she got out okay. There is an epilogue to this story. Much later on, after Lawrence got married, she was about to give birth. Lawrence and Dr. Stevens later claimed that Mary Roth had returned to help out and inhabited her body to make the childbirth painless. So perhaps Mary always stayed with Lawrence just to make sure she was all right. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think down in the comments. And now, time for my shameless plug. I am going to be at the Strange Realities Conference in Nashville, November 3rd through the 5th. There's going to be a lot of cool people there. Make sure to check it out at strangerealitiesconference.com. Looking for something to do after Halloween is over? Are you into the strange, bizarre, and unusual? On November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, the Strange Realities Conference is coming back to Nashville, Tennessee, and streaming online. Come join us for 3 days exploring mysteries, supernatural, the occult, weird history, and more, featuring lectures, presentations, and workshops by Tim Banal, Zach Hunt, Cheslin Vance, Bryn Collier, Tobias Whalen, Brent Rains, Joshua Cutchin, Kiki Dombrowski, Recluse, Nathan Isaac, Christopher Ernst, Aaron Gulias, David Metcalf, Timothy Renner, Mallory Sawinski, Soraya Ascap, and special guest Steve Berg as your Master of Ceremonies. Make sure to join us for the fun and informative weekend online and at SIR Nashville November 3rd and 4th and online only November 5th. Tickets are available at strangerealitiesconference.com.